Friends, we're all back together for the next episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Welcome.
My name is Jordon. You could also call me Jomo if you'd like, and I am a type 1 diabetic.
Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. AG1 is offering my listeners a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs in your first box. So make sure you check out drinkag1.com/juicebox to get this offer. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. Are you an adult living with type 1 or the caregiver of someone who is? If you are, I'd love it if you would go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and take the survey. When you complete that survey, your answers are used to move type 1 diabetes research of all kinds. So if you'd like to help with type 1 research, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. It should not take you more than about 10 minutes. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes and their MiniMed 780G system, designed to help ease the burden of diabetes management. Imagine fewer worries about missed boluses or miscalculated carbs, thanks to meal detection technology and automatic correction doses. Learn more and get started today at medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox. I'm having an on-body vibe alert. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365, the only 1-year wear CGM. That's one insertion and one CGM a year. One CGM, 1 year. Not every 10 or 14 days. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox.
My name is Jordon. You could also call me Jomo if you'd like, and I am a type 1 diabetic.
You say I could call you Jumbo?
Jomo.
Oh, damn. I love Jumbo, but I'll go Jomo if you need me to.
You've actually been saying something about FOMO, and I'm just like, it's FOMO. I'm Jomo. I know it's FOMO.
It's so funny how that, I guess marketing people probably love that it's grabbed so many people's attention. So we all know it's FOMO. But what Omnipod was doing was saying FOMO, right? So fear of missing out on Omnipod. And I was joking around going, is it FUMU or FOMU or like that? I guess it really worked. I should probably start doing it.
It caught a lot of attention for sure.
I should start doing that ad again. Apparently you guys got very upset. They're like, I genuinely got notes. People are like, it's FOMU. And I'm like, and they're like, well, you're saying it's FOMO, but you're saying moo, so it's FOMU. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Okay.
Yeah, I thought the whole conversation around it is just funny because I really don't care, but everyone else does. And it's like, whoa, people care about so many different things.
They really did care about that one. Yeah, that one was interesting. It took me by surprise. I'm not going to lie. How old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was diagnosed at the ripe age of 35.
Oh, gosh. How old are you now?
I am 37.
Not too long then, huh?
Nope. It's been about a year and a half.
Okay. All right. You sent a comprehensive list of things you want to talk about.
Oh, I was probably super manic at the time when my hormones were rebalancing. I don't even remember what I wrote, but looking back and listening to some more episodes, I'm like, geez, I probably rambled on.
Well, we'll see. Listen, it's all laid out for me here. I don't have a lot to do. It's going to be an easy lift for me, as they say.
Fantastic.
Tell me first, is there any other autoimmune in your family or with you?
I do not have any other autoimmune disease. I've actually been pretty healthy all my life, so this was quite a surprise. And it took me about 6 months of asking my mom, are you sure? Are you sure no one's type 1 diabetic? And then she finally figured out all of the people on her side of the family that were type 1 diabetic. So I have 2 cousins with type 1 diabetes, and one of those has a child with type 1.
So no one except for these 3 people.
Correct. And me.
Yeah. And you. So now 4. Well, your mom's on top of it. Is it just a thing where when you ask people in the family, do you think they limit it in their minds to themselves, their parents, and that's it?
I don't think so, because our families are pretty close. They grew up pretty close. Like, my mom knew of, it's her niece who had type 1. So she always knew that she had type 1. But, I asked everyone, I was like, even like rheumatoid arthritis, does anybody have anything? And the answer was no across the board.
Until the answer wasn't no.
Exactly.
And you dig a little bit. So people kind of stay private, and these are just cousins you didn't know that well, maybe?
My parents and my parents' family are a lot older than I was. So I did spend time with these cousins, but she actually got diagnosed at 6 years old, and she's almost 65 years old now. So she's almost 60 years with type 1 diabetes. I didn't know the other ones.
Oh, good for her. That's a nice little run. Okay, so how do you figure out you have it?
First, I just want to state that when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, my A1C was 18%. So I was quite sick for a very long time leading up to my diagnosis. I would probably place it, when you're diagnosed, it's just this huge rush of what actually happened. When did this actually start? Because by the time I actually went in, I couldn't walk, right? So I remember it was like, I don't know, 2021, I guess. And all of these COVID vaccines are coming out, and all of the news, like all these dangers, blah, blah, blah. This vaccine gives blood clots in your legs. That's the one that stuck out to me. And at that time, my legs had started to cramp significantly at nighttime, especially. Like, they'd wake me up in the middle of the night, and I'd feel like my leg was about to like rip off. Okay. And I was like, oh no, maybe I have blood clots from this vaccine. And, I just kept watch on that. I just kept thinking about it the whole time, but the symptoms kind of started to build from there. So that's the earliest I could place like really significant symptoms.
When you look back, Jordon, I mean, an 18 A1C is pretty significant, even at like a DKA diagnosis. So how long do you think this was all going on for?
I'd say probably about 2 years leading up until I finally went into the doctor.
Oh, you think you had like a lot of onset and you just didn't do anything about it for that long?
Yeah, I like to say I gaslit myself through the honeymoon phase.
Yeah, you were like, I see some people saying about this vaccine. It's probably got me.
Yeah.
And then you're like, so you'd follow any idea if it got you out of looking deeper at what was happening?
Absolutely. And, there was so much going on in life around those few years. I was moving cities for jobs and, all the lockdown that I honestly just thought I was exhausted. Mm-hmm. I was in my 30s. At this point, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm just getting old and this is what it's like.
Yeah.
Then there were some just symptoms that I couldn't ignore.
That's what I'm wondering. Which one really scared you over the edge? Why would you settle for changing your CGM every few weeks when you can have 365 days of reliable glucose data? Today's episode is sponsored by the Eversense 365. It is the only CGM with a tiny sensor that lasts a full year, sitting comfortably under your skin, with no more frequent sensor changes and essentially no compression lows for 1 year. You'll get your CGM data in real time on your phone, smartwatch, Android or iOS, even an Apple Watch. Predictive high and low alerts let you know where your glucose is headed before it gets there, so there's no surprises, just confidence. And you can instantly share that data with your healthcare provider or your family. You're going to get 1 year of reliable data without all those sensor changes. That's the Eversense 365. Gentle on your skin, strong for your life. One sensor a year that gives you one less thing to worry about. Head now to eversensecgm.com/juicebox to get started. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, who is making life with diabetes easier with the MiniMed 780G system. The MiniMed 780G automated insulin delivery system anticipates, adjusts, and corrects every 5 minutes. Real-world results show people achieving up to 80% time in range with recommended settings without increasing lows, but of course, individual results may vary. The 780G works around the clock so you can focus on what matters. Have you heard about Medtronic's extended infusion set? It's the first and only infusion set labeled for up to a 7-day wear. This feature is repeatedly asked for, and Medtronic has delivered. 97% of people using the 780G reported that they could manage their diabetes without major disruptions of sleep. They felt more free to eat what they wanted, and they felt less stress with fewer alarms and alerts. You can't beat that. Learn more about how you can spend less time and effort managing your diabetes by visiting medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox.
Oh, there were a few that lined up right towards the end. I wasn't able to go more than 30 minutes without having to use the restroom. Mm-hmm. And I was not always around a restroom, so there were often times where I'd have to pull over on the highway and use the side of the road. Or I'd have certain corners of my route home that I knew I could sneak into and no one would bother me. But it got to the point where I was also like falling asleep on the road while driving. I was thinking I was tired, stop in to use the restroom, get a coffee, drive for 30 more minutes, stop in for the restroom, grab a Coca-Cola this time. It's like the coffee's not working. Maybe the Coke will.
Yeah.
Downing a huge Coke and then,
How long's your commute, Jordon?
My commute is short, but I do a lot of driving tasks for work.
Okay.
I live in Orange County, so I have to drive up to LA often or down to San Diego often, and it's just a significant time.
Yeah. No, so you're in the car for many hours, but constantly stopping, recharging yourself with some sort of caffeine, taking an incredible wicked piss, and then moving on again.
Pretty much. Yep. Yeah. And that just got to the point, at nighttime, it was really bad. But really the thing that sent me over the edge was back to my legs. They just really stopped working. I live on a second floor, so walking up the stairs and walking down the stairs, like my tread wasn't correct. It wasn't normal. It was getting stuck, and I actually feared that I was going to fall down and hit my head. So,
no kidding. In your mid-30s, you're like, my legs aren't working anymore.
Yep.
Had you never been sick before that? Like, did you live a pretty unencumbered life prior to this?
Absolutely. I never got sick. Maybe once every couple years. Never got the flu. If anything, it was more physical injuries, but I was never used to being sick.
Yeah. So you're not particularly a person who's just ignoring things. It just feels like this can't be what's happening to me, right?
Well, I didn't know diabetes existed at that time. I did, but just jumping forward to when they hand you that pamphlet in the diabetes education, and I'm reading it and I look up at the nurse and I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I know this before? All of the shaky legs, off balance, like I could have dealt with this a long time ago.
Like, this is crazy that this didn't occur to me sooner.
I mean, immediately I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is the answer to all of these problems that I've been experiencing for the past 2 years.
Right. Were you able to let go of was there guilt around it, or did you let that go?
I mean, there was so much guilt for things not health related. All of the things that uncontrolled diabetes over 2 years does to your personal life and your relationships. I felt very guilty about those,
What sorts of things happened?
Having to move often during the pandemic was very difficult. And I was just married in 2019 to my beautiful wife. She's an Irish citizen, so she actually did the 90-day fiancé thing to get here.
Okay.
So I was moving her around. The person that she met, I was clearly not that person. I had a short attitude. I was clearly not able to comprehend situations very well.
Okay.
I was, short at work. I had an attitude. Things that I never experienced before. Looking back on it, I'm like, I was absolutely unhinged for quite some time. So my guilt was more around treating people poorly.
Okay.
But once I understood that I was kind of out of control, and that was kind of a symptom, I guess, of uncontrolled diabetes, I kind of let that go. I did immediately apologize to everybody. I even called my parents. I was like, look, I'm so sorry. I forgive you for never figuring this out earlier. I didn't know what was going on, especially as my A1C was dropping. The 6 months after that, it was just a whole whirlwind of emotions and experiences and forgiveness and, figuring out how to give grace to myself. And
yeah, that's interesting. Did you do like a 12-step tour? Did you go around and apologize to people in your life?
Pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, it was even things that I work in a theater. I work in technical theater.
Mm-hmm.
Things were really stressful opening up a theater after the pandemic too. You know, nobody was coming back to work. There was so much to do. Part of why I was ignoring the symptoms, I was like, I'm just overworked. I'm tired. I'd create accidents. Like nobody got hurt. Thank God. I'm so grateful for that. But, you know, I'd cause accidents and I've never done that.
Give me an example of how.
So we work with heavy theatrical equipment, you know, like a big theater light, and they go on like a boom base. Like there's a heavy weight on the ground and a pipe screws into it, and then you clamp a bunch of lights on it.
Okay.
And, you know, I'd clamp too many lights that it would be top heavy and it would eventually just fall over.
And you think because you just weren't, like, you didn't have the mental focus?
Yeah, in between having to go to the restroom while doing all these tasks, it was really difficult to give it the concentration that you really needed to make everything safe.
You're rushing around to go back to the bathroom again.
I mean, we use these scissor lift genies that go up, you know, 30 feet in the air and come back down. I couldn't make it halfway up sometimes before I'd have to come back down. It was really bad.
God. Listen, I could probably just stay in this the whole time. I'm not going to, but it is fascinating how consistent these stories are with people that, you know, their health is just deteriorating, you know, and crazy things are happening to them. And they're just like, I'm probably just getting older. You know what I mean? Like when you were 20, if I would have said to you, hey, you know, in your mid 30s, you're gonna have to pee every 20 minutes. That's part of getting older. You go, I don't think that's right.
Right? It's like, why is everyone keeping this a secret from me?
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, exactly. Why won't people tell this story about the peeing? But okay, so you get your diagnosis. You're newly married, and you kind of work out your life stuff, which is fantastic. And people were receptive to your apologies?
Oh my God, so much so.
Good.
Absolutely. And in fact, you know, the situation in my house was rather difficult that, you know, we had decided to go to therapy and go to couples counseling to figure out, you know, what my problem was now that looking back on it. And time just lined up so perfectly that I was diagnosed a couple days before our first therapy session. And we sat down, and I'm struggling with this diagnosis, and my wife is struggling with having lost her husband. That she said something that really stuck out to me, and it's really helped me the whole time. And she basically separated the situation from itself. She said, what you were dealing with was this like third party. You had a mistress that was in the shadows that you didn't know was there. Both of you didn't know it was there, but it was causing difficulties. So she really helped me separate, you know, the uncontrolled diabetes and the diabetes from who I am as a person. And that's just really helped me with this whole journey.
Yeah, very kind. And not just kind, but, you know, a lot of emotional maturity there from her.
For sure. She was great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's look at this list. Do you feel like the COVID vaccine had something to do with your diagnosis?
I mean, a little bit in a way. Like, I know I'll never know what did, but considering that I can pinpoint a moment in time, like, I don't think I'm just correlating something, even though it's clearly a correlation. I think they're connected significantly.
Okay. Let's start with the dates first. So you think it's possible that this health trend was happening over 2 years. When was 2 years? Like, what point in time does those 2 years begin?
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes officially on 4/20/2023.
Okay. But you think it may have been going on since 2018?
No, not 2018. The symptoms would have been going on since about 2021.
Since 21. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So you were diagnosed about a year and a half ago. Can you look at like when you got the vaccine and when that 2 years falls? Do those dates fall close to each other?
Yes, they absolutely do. So I'd received like, you know, the second half of the first vaccine in March of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was diagnosed in April 23. So it was a year and like a month. And the timeline, and like I said, I just remember all the news about the blood clots. And I took them seriously. Like, you know, and let me just say that I've had every single booster since. So I'm not like trying to say that, you know, it's causing type 1 diabetes.
That's not the conversation. I'm trying to get like just through your, through what happened to you and I have some things to say about it as well, but I'm trying to get all the information out first. So what was your reaction? Like, sometimes people get inoculated for something and then they'll get sick. Like some people get the flu vaccine, then they get the flu. Were you sick after you got inoculated?
Nope. Never got sick. The things that started were, I remember peeing at nighttime, and I remember my legs starting to give up on me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
did you ever get COVID?
When I was diagnosed and I got the A1C of 18%, I didn't know what an A1C was at that time. So I went to Google and I learned that all of the charts only went up to 14%. And I was like, so 18%, it's obviously it's not real. Like, this is fake. So I'll go back when it's convenient and get retested. Then I got COVID for the first time.
Okay.
So I got COVID right after my first A1C result.
Gotcha. So your A1C was creeping up. Actually, creeping up's the wrong word. It was flying up. I'm clearly not a doctor, right? But a lot of people's diagnoses come after a virus. And, I can speak for my daughter specifically. She had Coxsackie, and then her onset happened. This is not uncommon. Like, this is a very well understood way that type 1 can kind of get thrown, into the forefront. So you are likely walking around with some autoantibodies that are an indicator, a marker that you could get type 1 diabetes.
Yep.
So you get, a virus, it kind of like kicks your immune system into gear. You know how it goes, right? It goes and they go, the T cells go find your beta cells instead of finding the illness or whatever. And I mean, I think we all understand that when you get a vaccine, the vaccine, is trying to get your body to respond to, listen, again, this is outside of my purview, but they put the sickness in there. So your body goes, oh, this is bad. I'll learn how to get rid of this. And then that's what a vaccine's supposed to be, right? If it gets that response going and your body is ripe to, for those T cells to go get your beta cells instead, it doesn't sound crazy to me. It certainly doesn't.
Yeah, and I'm also not going to discount the fact that if I were to have gotten COVID, I'd end up in the same place. So, that didn't happen. So.
I understand. Okay. I just wanted to understand from your list. All right. I like this list here. Ungodly A1Cs, cholesterol and type 1. What about your cholesterol?
Yeah, so I'm a really skinny dude. I had even lost 25 pounds. I was down to like 120 pounds when I was finally diagnosed. I'm not one that gets sick often, so I received an actual phone call from my doctor. And I was like, do doctors normally call people? Is this what's going on?
Yeah.
But when she told me about the odd A1C, she also told me that my LDL was really high. And I know nothing about cholesterol either. I know that I was a really skinny dude, and having a really, really high cholesterol was super bizarre as well. So those were the two results that I'm now learning are quite connected, the high glucose. And
has your cholesterol gone back to normal?
So they put me on a statin, and I avoided taking it for about 6 months. And my cholesterol did come down a little bit. I don't really know how the numbers work, but my LDL was like 190 or something like that. And in 6 months with just insulin, that came down to about 160, almost a year on statins. And, it's back within range. I'm below 90 now. So
how's your diet?
I'm a vegetarian. Been vegetarian for like 8 years. And after my diagnosis, I was having a hard time with protein. So we've introduced fish back into our diet.
Okay. What does that make you it's not, now you're not a vegetarian, you're
I guess it's a pescatarian technically.
Pescatarian. Yeah.
But my wife goes, if you hear me talk about food, I never say what I am. I just eat. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense too.
So I'm looking here. Type 1 diabetes can impact LDL cholesterol levels with overall lipid profiles in several ways. Glycemic control, poorly managed blood sugar levels in type 1s can lead to higher LDL. Hyperglycemia can alter lipid metabolism, promoting an increase in LDL, particularly in the more harmful small, dense LDL particles. People with type 1, insufficient insulin can affect the liver's ability to regulate cholesterol. Inflammation and oxidation. Chronic high blood sugar can cause inflammation and oxidative stress, which oxidizes LDL particles. If type 1 diabetes leads to kidney complications like neuropathy, LDL levels can rise further. So that's what I can find about that. I can also tell you that in one of our episodes somewhere, Jenny goes off on a bit of a rant about type 1s getting statins when they don't need them. So, but it sounds like it helped you. Will you try to get off of them? Has the doctor talked to you about that?
My last A1C check, my last round of blood check, they didn't call for a lipid panel. So I asked for them to write a script for it. So I'm going to go in and get that done. I have a feeling I really do not want to take statins for the rest of my life.
Yeah. But
every single endocrinologist I've talked to, and I've talked to more than just my primary endo, they just look you dead in the eye and they're like, no, this is, you just should.
Yeah. Again, not a doctor, not advice. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if pharma companies run around saying, hey, here's some obvious reasons, like some of the ones I just read, why people with type 1 diabetes should use a statin, then why not give them to them? And then it kind of becomes the standard of care. And then I don't know if people think about it as much as if they just say, well, this is what we do, so here, take it. So, I mean, I don't know, man. If I was you, I'd get it rerun. If my LDL looked good, I'd say I'd like to come off this medication and try again, in an appropriate amount of time to do another blood test and see if it stays that way. Because, I mean, if the things I just read were what impacted you, and you were maybe in the middle of like a lot of diagnosis over 2 years that culminated in an 18 A1C, then, now that you're doing better, maybe you don't need that anymore.
That's completely the route I'm planning on taking. If my LDL has dropped since my last one a year ago, I'm going to get off of them until my next round of tests just to see. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, listen. You know what I'm saying. Tell your doctor, etc. This part of me wants to jump ahead on your list, and part of me wants to keep going in order because you've done such a nice job of laying it out here for me. You said, my frame of mind post-diagnosis about how to view this new chronic illness in my life. You're calling it like a new shot at life, and I'm interested in what you mean by that.
Yeah. So I don't know really how to get into this, but I guess when I was sitting there in the doctor's office after my official diagnosis, and I do want to say that I had my A1C of 18%, and I wasn't put on insulin until 28 days later. So
wait, hold on. They didn't rush you to a hospital?
No, Scott. They let me ignore phone calls. And I went on March 23rd for my first test. I didn't go back to get retested until April 14th.
So they just, they called you and you just didn't call back?
No, I talked to them. I was like, yeah, I don't believe this test result is correct. I'll come in and get it retested.
But like you said, you were altered at that point.
I was completely altered at that point.
Yeah. Listen, I can commiserate with this because if you've heard enough of the podcast, you'll know that I had very low iron at points in my life. And it was difficult to talk to me about things. Like I had a very short fuse about nothing. It completely and utterly connected to the low iron.
Yeah.
So if you're foggy in your head, it's hard to respond to things. You know what I mean?
And the fact that I got COVID very soon after that first test, it just completely washed me. I had no idea what was going on. But I did spend that time between March 23rd and April 14th looking into it more and kind of connecting the dots that, Jordon, you might actually have type 1 diabetes. Because that's what she said. She told me, she goes, I've never seen an A1C this high before. And she's a young person, so I doubt she's seen, I don't know if many people have seen an A1C like this. But she was like, I talked to some colleagues and they're like, if your test results are confirmed, you have uncontrolled type 1 diabetes. Right. I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I'm 35 years old. I don't have diabetes, And then I go off and get COVID, and then I look into it further. I learned what ketones are. So I asked my wife to pick up some ketone strips while she was out. And they were just black as could be.
Yeah. Jeez, man. Oh, you're lucky.
I'm so lucky. And that's kind of to your original question, is that I was sitting there in the doctor's office. They're finally giving me insulin. I have no idea what's going on. My wife is sitting there, has no idea what's going on. We're reading this information. It says, if your blood glucose is over 300, you need to go to the emergency room immediately. And I just poked a 369 and I hadn't eaten in 18 hours.
300, I could do that standing on my head.
I mean, at that point, I was like, what? Am I some superhuman? I honestly felt like the most diabetic person in the entire world at that moment when everything was kind of coming to like fruition, when I was understanding it more clearly, that this was like something really significant and life-changing.
You were like, I have the most diabetes anybody's ever had.
In this very moment, I sure did feel like it.
I mean, you were in DK. I imagine they shared that with you, right?
Scott, I have spent a year and a half trying to figure out what DKA is. And, you know, I gaslit myself through 2 years of LADA. Chances are I was absolutely in DKA. I mean, I don't know how they test for that, how they determine that. But yeah, I mean, I was throwing up my dinner. I was, you know.
You never landed in the hospital?
Not once.
They just gave you insulin a month later.
They gave me insulin 28 days later. Yeah.
I don't think you were treated well, in case you're wondering.
Well, and here's me thinking I was treated so well and my life was saved by these people. And then, you know, a year later, you look back and you're like, oh my God, they're so lucky I'm not dead.
Yeah, they should have tackled you and drug you to a hospital.
That's what it sounds like. I mean, knowing more about it, I'm kind of a little upset, but I'm well. So that's all that matters.
We're going to move on, you say. That's nice. You feel like something really awful could have happened to me, and it kind of gave you that renewed idea of like, this is another shot at my life.
Well, no, like let's get a little metaphysical here, but I'm sitting there and they're teaching me about Lantus and they're teaching me about Humalog, and they walk me through giving my first 12 units of Lantus is what they give me first. They're like, here's how you draw up insulin. Here's 12 units of Lantus. And I'm telling you, Scott, the second I put that syringe into my stomach for the first time, like the whole world around me, like melted and spun and everything transformed in like this weird sense that I can only now like place it as like I jumped timelines.
What do you think happened?
I think I had this realization that I've been like diabetic my entire life and that there wasn't a day of my life that I lived where I wasn't a type 1 diabetic. I mean, even looking back to childhood and everything, I'm just like, whoa, that poor kid.
Why do you think that? Did you have symptoms throughout your life?
Well, I don't think so. Maybe.
Oh, you are talking more about like kind of like spiritually then.
Yeah, like spiritually, like that person is dead. Like the non-type 1 diabetic version of Jordon who lived his life without type 1 diabetes is gone forever from this world. No longer exists.
How much weed or other stuff were you using when you had this thought?
Funny, I do smoke a lot of weed, which makes it really ironic that I was diagnosed on 420. I'm not sure if you get that reference, but it was my favorite holiday up until a while ago. It's funny enough, when I checked my blood sugar for the first time on the glucose meter, you open up your glucose meter and the first question it asks is, what time is it? And you look up at the anatomic clock in the doctor's office and it just clicked over to 420. It was 420 on 420 when I took my first glucose stick, and I was like, my blood sugar is going to be 420. It ended up being 369, but...
What a bummer.
I know. I was a little upset, but my wife is over here like, 300, you need to go to the ER. I wonder what 400 would have done.
400 probably would have sent you to the ER on your back. How long have you been smoking?
A very, very long time. So probably since I was like 18 years old. I'm 37 now, so almost 20 years.
Daily?
Oh, yeah, regularly.
Okay. Which means like wake and bake?
A lot of times, yeah.
Okay. And then throughout the day, you like, how do you do it? Do you like hit a joint a couple times? You smoke the whole thing? Like,
no, it's just a couple. I usually use a pipe and it's like 1 or 2 hits in the morning and then when I get home from work.
How do you describe to people what it does for you?
You know, people don't really ask.
I'm asking.
It makes me feel good. It makes me enjoy things. I give a lot more grace. I have a lot more patience. I have a lot more creative thoughts.
Mm-hmm. The weed couldn't cut through the high blood sugars though, huh?
Well, I see. It must have been making me feel good the whole time because I was just ignoring all the symptoms of the illness. But
now, you know, people listening are to think if you weren't high, you would have figured out you had diabetes 2 years sooner, right?
Yeah, I'm sure I would have.
Was your access to weed part of how you tricked that lovely girl into marrying you from Ireland?
No, get this. We actually met on Tinder in Dubai, of all places. So it's very much a place where you do not smoke weed.
Oh, can I ask why you were there?
I was living there. I was working there. And
Okay.
she was also there living and working at the time.
So you swipe, catch her, you guys meet there, and you start dating in Dubai.
We start meeting in Dubai. We're there for a few years. Then I get another job in Doha, Qatar, right next door. And she gets a job there. We move there. And then that project that I was working with ended. So I moved back to Seattle, and we had been engaged before then. So we just figured it was best to come this way as I had work. And that's kind of how that all started.
You can't smoke there, though, right?
Where? In Dubai?
Yeah.
No, you can't.
So what did you do while you were there?
I had friends who were Arabic, from Egypt, from around, who were a little more risk adverse I was a little more risk adverse. They were a little more comfortable with it. So I, had friends. You always have friends.
So you do this completely privately then?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
What were the risks? Like, what would have happened if you got caught?
I didn't look into it, but I'm sure I would have been. I mean, and I don't really know how it works, but as an American citizen, I had a lot more lenience than a lot of people from a lot of other countries, but I'm pretty sure they would have put me in jail for a long time.
Severe legal penalties, possession, use, or trafficking of cannabis can lead to long prison sentences, fines, and deportation. Even small amounts or trace residues can result in 4 years in prison.
Yep.
Wow. Can you imagine being diagnosed with your type 1? Would that have lined up by any chance?
What's that?
What if you got locked up in Dubai? Would you have gotten type 1 during the 4 years in prison?
Jeez, 2018 to 22. Yeah.
You'd probably be dead then.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. You could be deported, serving a sentence. You'd be blacklisted from returning to the UAE. Oh, wow. That's interesting. Yeah. I like how you handled it like a stoner, though. You're like, I just didn't look into it. It was fine.
Yeah. I mean, you always find a way.
Life finds a way, Scott, and so does weed.
I've been a lot of places, and I've found weed in every single one of them.
I would imagine it. I would imagine it's everywhere. You said in your list here you use psychedelics as well. What kind?
I do use psychedelics. You name it. I've done all of them, but mostly leading up to my diagnosis, I was microdosing on psilocybin mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. How does that work, the microdosing?
So the microdosing is very, very small amounts of it to where it has no psychedelic effect on you. Have you ever had like mushroom coffee or any of those mushroom supplements? Kind of gives you like an energy boost.
I haven't, but I've heard of them.
Yeah, it's kind of like an energy boost, like a clean caffeine, so to say. But that's kind of the effects of like a microdose of mushrooms.
Okay.
And you usually mix it with other like non-psychedelic mushrooms like turkey's tail or lion's mane mushroom. They have, really great properties in terms of like brain health and in connecting neurons and things like that. So,
okay. Is there a difference in using these things pre and post insulin?
Yeah. So that is a story in itself.
Go ahead.
My first blood work was done on March 13th. But 2 weeks prior to that, I actually did my largest dose of mushrooms and had a complete ego death then as well. So I was, through this whole diagnosis process, I was probably still living the thoughts through that. During that mushroom journey, we call it a journey. And, I do not really use these recreationally. Sometimes I do, but it's more so for like therapeutic sense, if that makes sense. I don't know how someone who doesn't use psychedelics really views them, but it is a very therapeutic and healing medicine. They're referred to as medicines in my house. But I did have my largest mushroom journey about a week prior to my first A1C result, where I had kind of lost the ability to navigate the psychedelic realm in the same way that I was used to. And instead, I was kind of presented with, I met a couple gods. If that sounds, I guess that tracks, right? Do mushrooms meet God?
I want to hear all about this. So, because you already said ego death, and I met some gods, and it feels like you're going to have like a definite like Little Red Riding thing where you meet 3 different pigs and they're building different houses or something like that. So I want to hear about all. Actually, that's not Little Red Riding Hood. That's
the 3 little pigs.
That 3 little pigs. Mixing up my stupid references for a second. But I want to hear all about this. So like, let's start at the beginning. How long have you been using psychedelics to go on these journeys?
In a therapeutic sense and more of a therapy sense, it's probably been since about 2020.
How'd you learn about them?
I was introduced to psychedelics when I was in college. We used to pick field mushrooms out of the cow shit and dry those and have some tea.
Okay. And so somebody at school told you about this. You did it at first recreationally, but then you've kind of, I guess, paid more attention to it, spoken to more people, and you're using it more now for what?
Really just for a sense of healing, trying to figure out. So really the main purpose is it kind of removes the conditioning that we've built up in our minds for, all of the years that we've lived. It opens yourself up to other possibilities. If you're struggling with something, like if I'm struggling with grief, I can focus my session on dealing with this grief and trying to learn whatever lesson the mushroom world is going to teach.
Okay. I mean, walk somebody through that who doesn't understand, like what the mushroom world is going to teach. So what's the experience like?
So the experience is rather scary if you don't know what's going on. I'm not the one who is working with the mushrooms. Like, I'm not the mentor. I'm kind of just the, like, I don't know. What are you? There's a therapist and then there's the patient. I don't,
People aren't going to understand that. So like you kind of have like almost like a shaman to get you through your journey when you're using the psychedelic. Is that right?
Correct. It is all in a very controlled environment. It is not really something I do by myself very often, though I am fully capable of it. But when I am seeking help or guidance, I do go to, a shaman.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And by shaman, we mean a guy named Gary, right?
We'll just call her Laura.
Okay.
You would never assume if you met me or Laura that this would be part of any of our lives.
Everyone who doesn't live in California is like, these are the LA stories I hear. But how long does this process take? Like you show up at her place at 9 a.m. and you leave when?
Around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
6-7 hours. And so you ingest the mushroom. It takes a while to do what it's going to do. And then do you feel like you're still in the room? Do you go away in your head? Do you feel like you're somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a mix and mash of all of that combined. There are moments where you're kind of stuck in your head, like how you've seen movies where like the walls start to transform or the colors start to melt, and all of that stuff is real. And that's the visual aspect of psychedelics. But if you close your eyes, your brain is actually just going absolutely crazy. And probably the best way that I could describe most of my experiences, especially when I close my eyes, is like, imagine you are a student, a film student in an art school, and you're asked to make a 15-second short film to represent life, but you can't have anything recognizable about life. Mm-hmm. And you're just watching thousands of those take place kind of in no particular order. It's just these visuals, these things that are coming out at you, and you do your best to remember it while you're in the moment so you can take the lessons of whatever these things are with you and you're back to your conditioned mind.
Do these journeys help you with anxiety, stress, trauma? Like, is there anything you can point to that says, like, prior to trying this, I felt this way, but now I feel differently?
Yeah, for sure. I remember the first time, and this is recreational use, but the first time I ever did LSD, I came to the realization that there was probably no film director in Hollywood who has not done a psychedelic, because filming a cinematic scene is really impressive and it's very difficult. Not every average Joe can go out there with a camera and just, film something. But for the first time, I was able to kind of see the world through like a more universal lens that was not just me. There's you feel a sense of connection with anything and everything that's around you. And if I had never taken psychedelics before, I don't think I would have experienced that kind of connection. Like fungus is a mycelium, right? Have you ever seen like the way that fungus grows? It's like a network of web that kind of stretches. And I'm not going to be completely accurate with this, but that mycelium web basically encompasses the whole world. Like it's fully connected with each other all around the world, just about. So it's this amazing like sense of connection with not only just the people, but like with the air you breathe, with the birds that are singing, with everything. You kind of get a sense of I am that also.
Okay. All right. So you see the world differently, but you didn't have like, it's not like you were depressed before and not after, or anxious. You have like social anxiety and it's gone now or anything like that?
Myself, no. The main reason that I use psychedelics is to continue to work towards full empathy and just, like, this is so hippie, but like just love.
Okay. How many trips until you get there, do you think?
I'm working on it.
Yeah. How many has it been? Have you lost count?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
50, more or less?
No, probably less. I've probably, 20 to 30 times with different substances.
Is it cumulative for you? Like the way you are able to connect with the world, like does it get greater every time, or does it move, or do you feel like that it happens and then it regresses and then you have to bring it back again?
No, I feel a strong connection to each journey. And every time I go back into it, it's like I'm back into a not so familiar, but familiar space that I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate. It's like a world, it's a world. And the better you are at understanding this world, the more that you get out of it. Like the guy who created the mouse, the computer mouse, I think he was on LSD when he created that. So I'm like, maybe I could find a lesson like that.
Okay. If I told you could live in only one world, which one would you pick?
Oh, this one for sure.
Okay.
However, I will tell you that if I'm on my dying bed, like if I'm in hospice and they start to take all my medications, my wife knows I would like to have some LSD in that saline drip as I drift off into the next world.
Okay. Does your wife do any of this stuff?
Yes.
Okay. That's part of the way you connected?
It's a part of the way that we have continued to connect. It's this world. So she's from Ireland and they're very Catholic over there. And she moving here kind of opened her eyes in a lot of good ways and a lot of bad ways. America is just very different and very chaotic compared to a lot of other places. And she had a difficult time with that. So she has found psychedelic use to kind of open her eyes up to that a little bit and to kind of try to get a sense of what is actually going on in the world. But no, she does participate as well. She's more reverent towards it than I am.
Talking about it like it's a spiritual experience.
Absolutely.
You're talking about it like it's more of a chemical experience.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. And let's see. Is it dangerous for people who are listening? Are there dangers? Like, could you go on and not come back?
I listened to a couple people talk about psychedelics recently, and they always seem to start off their conversations with the risks. And they always say that there are no real risks, like in terms of dying or in terms of getting stuck with these psychedelics. And they always start off their conversations like that because it's always a question that people have in their mind. So I should have started off with that. I actually intended to, but thanks for bringing it up. No, it is not a dangerous thing. Okay. And it's not one thing that you're going to want to go back to the next day. I'm going to have my experience. I'm going to think about my experience for 6 more months before I'm even going to want to consider it. It's not something that is really prone to addiction. It has no addicting properties.
Okay. It doesn't feel addictive to you. How about, do you feel addicted to weed?
I don't. I could stop and I could be fine. I just choose to keep going back to it.
So you've never had a bad trip, like where, like you get like super anxious, paranoid, like the hallucinations frighten you, anything like that?
I mean, sometimes they are frightening. I wouldn't consider it a bad trip. It's all kind of relative in terms of what you take away from it. Some people meet demons and then come out and, swear Jesus killed these demons and they're now Christian for life. That's a bad trip for them, and Jesus saved them from that. However, that's what they took from it. I wouldn't consider that a bad trip. They're now happy.
Jordan, I'm just going to jump in here and say that the internet says that prolonged or heavy use of LSD can result in cognitive impairments, mood instability, and persistent hallucinations, making it difficult for individuals to function in normal daily life. It also says that a predisposition to mental health conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar, if you have those, LSD can exacerbate these conditions or trigger latent psychosis. So
absolutely. That's why I highly recommend finding somebody who takes this very seriously. They do kind of screen for these things that you're speaking of.
I just want to say that nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician, or at least find Laura before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Like I'm just talking to you about your experience. And I think everyone, I hope adults understand. I'm like, you are not telling people like, you should do this thing. Like you're just, sharing your experience.
Absolutely. And, I would kind of shy away from talking about this if I felt that I would be judged negatively in any way. And if they do, then that's probably something that psychedelics could help with.
Listen, I know people who are voracious for this kind of thing to be taken more seriously by the health community, that they would love to try some of this stuff to get past some significant trauma they've had in their life. There's studies going on at Hopkins, right, about this, I think, where they're trying to help soldiers get through, things. And I'm for whatever helps people. Like, if something helps you, I think it's awesome. If smoking every day makes you feel like you're a better person, or you're experiencing life in a way that's more, conducive to how you feel, then I think you should smoke every day. And if you don't, then I don't think you should. I'm not for telling people what to do. That's for certain.
So one thing that I struggle with in some of these journeys of mine is who keeps telling us what to do. That's just this loop that I keep getting stuck in, is like, why are we doing the things that we're doing? Like, who's telling us this? I'm in control of this.
Right. So there's no hard and fast rules about most things. And, we do things because it's how they've been done prior, and because they morph with the times, right? Like things change as they go. But I hear this morning, somebody said something. They used the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I thought that's so funny, because if that idea would have been originated like 10 years ago instead of whenever it originated, it might be more like the squeaky computer fan gets the graphite. And like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, so like, at some point there's wagon wheels and they squeak, and somebody smears some grease on them. They don't squeak anymore. And then one day somebody complains about something and makes that leap in their head and goes, oh, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Like they got what they wanted because they complained. But if that would have happened for the first time, like I said, 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been about wheels and grease. It would have been about something else. And so I guess my point is maybe I should do some LSD before I try to talk about this. But
no, and I mean, I knew that coming on to this, that I would be talking to someone who is not had the experience, and that's okay. Yeah. I'm not the best person to kind of, speak to the benefits of it. I'm just simply a person who has experienced benefits from it.
Yeah, you don't need to be the one who ascribes the reason why. You can just say, I do it, and this is how it works out for me.
Yeah, I do it. I'm a normal dude, and I'm a really good person. That's kind of the taboo that needs to be broken.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I was just saying, like, back to your original point of, like, why do we do what we do? Like, who says what's right and what's wrong? I think things just get set, and then they morph slowly over time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there will be another saying for the squeaky wheel gets the grease one day.
There sure will.
There will be another saying for that. It'll mean the same thing. And no one alive at that point will have ever heard the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yep.
And so we set things up, and then they morph slowly. But in the end, if you wanted to run around and say, use another euphemism for that, you could. We see language change all the time. just for that, like people, they have different ways of talking. They ascribe those words to scenarios. Who says that, me saying lit, which is not a thing I would say, but like is any different, bad or worse than somebody else saying that was cool? And so who tells us what to do? I think the ether does. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like the more things that people agree with, then we say, well, that's the norm.
That's kind of the connectivity that I seek when I'm in my psychedelic state.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you that I don't think there's any such thing as normal. I think there's just what more people are comfortable doing, which I guess means normal, but it doesn't make it abnormal if you're not doing those things.
For sure.
In my opinion. Just because you're not following the crowd doesn't make you a criminal or abnormal or something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of people who didn't follow the crowd are the ones who changed the course of the world forever.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's up to you, right? Do what you're going to do. Maybe you'll invent a mouse, although that's been done already, Jordan. So we're going to need you to do something else if you don't.
No,
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if you wake up one day and you're just like, I've got it. You design something we already have. And you're like, I figured it out. What do you do for a living? You said you're in a car a lot.
Well, I work in theater. I work in live entertainment and theater in a professional theater.
Okay.
I'm a production manager, so I'm more administrative, but I do a lot of stuff.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was a side gig or if that was your actual work. So, okay. Awesome. So, I mean, I assume that like this kind of like looseness is valuable in your job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's not many tight asses who do very well in this field.
You're telling me it's possible there was some weed in the room when somebody said one day, like, I think we could turn Lion King into a stage play.
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
That makes sense to me. How do you manage your diabetes? Do you still using injections or do you have a pump or what do you do?
Yeah, I was on MDI for my first year and a half or year and a couple months. And I just upgraded to the Tandem Mobi about 6 weeks ago.
How are you finding it?
I love it. I absolutely love it. It was another one of those experiences where I put it on and I was like, whoa, this is a new part. This is a new me. It was very, very overwhelming, but I love it so much.
What has it brought to you?
It has brought me the freedom to eat more intuitively without having to give myself injections. I understood diabetes. I like to say I think I understood it very quickly thanks to a lot of the amazing resources like the Juicebox Podcast that are out there. And I got my A1C under control very quickly. And I did very well MDI. And I was kind of hesitant to actually move on to a pump because I was very comfortable in my new setting. But I found I was able to replicate my numbers within the first 2 weeks. So It was absolutely amazing.
How's your standard deviation? Like what's the range you shoot for?
Under 30.
Your standard deviation's under 30.
That's what I shoot for, I think, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm actually experiencing my first bout of potentially battling an illness, and all of my numbers right now, my basal rate is usually like around 0.65, 0.7. Right now it's 2, and I'm holding steady.
Wow, look at you being able to pivot like that. What gave you the courage to go from 0.65 to 2?
Because I was looking at my Tandem Source reports, and I noticed that while my basal insulin was like 15 units a day, my bolus insulin was like 40. So I go, this isn't right. I'm bolusing to correct for the incorrect basal. So I just yoked it up. I was like, either I'm going to go low and have to treat it, or this is exactly what I need. And it happened to be exactly what I needed.
And you think this is during an illness?
But I went up to the mountains to high altitude. I think I'm dealing with some allergies. I was kind of dealing with some sinus pressure. I'm feeling a lot better today, but there were 3 days where my insulin needs, I average like 25, 30 units of insulin a day at this point, but I was averaging 55 to 60 over the last 3 days. So,
okay.
But yeah, I pulled up my standard deviation is over the last 90 days is 34.
And this is in a very short time. You haven't had a pump for long. Is that right?
Correct.
Wow. I think generally speaking, elevation seems to make people more insulin sensitive. So probably not wrong for you to assume you're battling some sort of an illness that just needed some more insulin, and you'll just pivot back when that need goes away.
Absolutely.
Hey, look at you, man. Good for you. That's awesome. What was your last A1C, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I just got it a couple weeks ago. It was a 6.2.
No, good for you. Look at you. You're doing terrific. That's awesome. What does diabetes education look like for an adult in your area? Like, what were you told, and how much was from them, and how much did you have to figure out on your own?
By the time I got my second confirmed high A1C, I already knew I was diabetic at that point. I didn't need the antibodies tests to prove it, even though they came later. So I just started soaking in all of the information I could before I even met any doctor to talk about diabetes. I read the whole book, Think Like a Pancreas, cover to cover. I took notes. I figured out my own ratios prior to getting insulin given to me. So I would say the education was rather piss poor, and brunt of it was done through myself.
Okay. And how did you find the podcast then?
I can't quite remember, but during the first few days of acceptance, I was wildly searching through Facebook, through Google, through anything that had to do with type 1 diabetes. And I think I kept seeing this Juicebox pop up and Think Like a Pancreas pop up. So those were my first two resources that I went to. They turned out to be pretty supreme.
Excellent. I'm glad they were helpful for you.
What actually got me into your podcast was, well, I went to TikTok first and foremost to kind of figure out what was going on. Because I also had these chronic hives all my life. Get this. I've had chronic hives all my life. All my life, since I was a kid, since I was a child. Since being on insulin, I have not had one flare-up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have your thyroid checked too?
Perfect thyroids. I like right in the middle on the,
Tell me your TSH. Do you know it?
I think I have my test results right here. Let's see. I did, but it logged me out of my health portal here. But I did make sure. I didn't get them checked at first, but the second time my first endo follow-up 6 months after diagnosis, I made sure that they checked my thyroids because I hear it all the time on this podcast.
Good. Do you have any indicators for hypothyroidism, like low energy, digestive issues, skin, hair, nails, like hair falling out, dry skin?
I did,
muscle?
But I think I could connect a lot of that stuff to
the
diabetes,
to the high blood sugars. Yeah.
Yeah, but my
So that stuff's
TSH,
gone.
I got it checked in March this year. It was a 1.
Oh man, look at you. Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's beautiful. So you had a lot of symptoms that could have been a number of different things, but taking the insulin, getting yourself under control, all that stuff went away.
Everything went away. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you how good I feel. I feel better than I've ever felt in my entire life.
Yeah, that's excellent, man. I'm happy for you. That's really awesome. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to? Because I went by your list, but I don't know if you even knew what the list was.
Yeah, I have no idea what the list was, but I mean, I think we pretty much talked about everything.
Can I ask, is there any autoimmune in your wife's family? Because a lot of that stuff can run around in Ireland.
Yeah, her mom has. Oh gosh, I know what it is. I just can't think of it. Where you have the rash, psoriasis.
Okay,
Is that autoimmune?
I believe it is. Yeah.
And I think she has arthritis as well, some form of arthritis. But
Okay. Do you guys talk about having kids?
prior to my diagnosis, prior to the pandemic, I had already taken care of that, and we decided long ago we will not have kids. And this,
How'd you take care of it? What'd you do?
I went to Dr. Snips a lot.
Wow. So you guys got together and said, no kids, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen.
I mean, absolutely.
I want to say I don't care. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's not a judgment, but I'm interested to know, like, what made you say I don't want to have children, and how the hell did you find a girl who agreed with you?
First, I'm a very progressive person, Scott, if you haven't maybe assumed that, but it's really not my choice,
The lady said she didn't want to do it.
Yeah, if she didn't want to have a kid, then it was definitely her prerogative to not have a kid. I was not convinced one way or the other that being a parent was a good idea or a bad idea, but our lifestyles were not really conducive to bringing in a child. I work in theater entertainment. We haven't lived in the same. Actually, we live here in this city for 3 years now, and that's the longest we've spent in one city in the last 10 years.
Really?
So just our lifestyles really weren't conducive, and we're just not really fans of the state of the world. It's a little too chaotic and a little too polarized to bring a child into it.
Okay. You've got that vibe and you're just like, we're not going to do this thing.
Yep. So now we got to figure out what we're going to create, as a couple throughout our journey, but it's definitely not going to be a child.
Okay. What do you think it'll be? This is interesting. What could it possibly be?
That's what we're struggling to figure out. That's what we're working to figure out. And that's, in a way, that's kind of what the medicine is kind of helping us figure out as well.
Okay. I see. So you're doing a little, some people say it's like little trolls or have you ever seen a troll? Have you ever done that one?
Yeah, let's take it back. So
good.
I did my largest mushroom journey leading the week before my diagnosis. And during that journey was the first time I was ever approached by actual physical entities. Like I saw gods, we'll call them, or spirits or deities. I don't even know. But the first one was like a very angelic figure. And my wife tells me about this journey, and she says that I was laying on the floor, I was curled in the fetal position, probably in DKA already in this incredible ego death journey that I'm in. But I met this first God, and he told me that everything was going to be okay. He's like, it's okay, calm down, you are fine, you are well taken care of. That was interrupted by a second spirit. We'll call this one a spirit because he was showing me how he was in charge of creating all of the sounds of the universe. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of orchestrating the birds chirping and harmony and all of these beautiful, beautiful, just overwhelmed with these beautiful sounds. And then finally I was interrupted by this last guy who was a little more shadowy, film noir-esque kind of guy, and said that I'd still be able to eat all the chocolate I wanted to. So these are the three people that I met, and taking that and looking at it through the lens of a now newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic, I took those lessons. The first one being I could still do whatever I want. Absolutely. Diabetes is not going to stop me from doing anything. In fact, it's only going to lead to me being able to do more, I think. Secondly, the noises, I think that was just, part of the journey. But the third one telling me I was still allowed to eat chocolate, and then, hearing podcasts or hearing other influencers who are just talking about managing your insulin levels and still being able to eat intuitively. And they were all just really important lessons that I have still held on to. Here I am talking about a year and a half later. I still think about it and I still hold on to those things because I honestly think I was a couple days away from dying. In all honesty.
I mean, you could have been. It's certainly, it was a long time and a high blood sugar and a significant, A1C. And it wasn't touching you. Meaning it wasn't you're losing your legs, but if you would have just kept pushing through it, you could have went over. There's no doubt it could have happened that way.
Yeah. So, and you ask, is there a difference between the journeys prior to diagnosis and post-diagnosis? Well, I didn't meet people like this. I didn't meet gods. I didn't meet, other figures. They were more just you're in this world, figure out what the lessons are. This was cut, dry, plain simple. They were telling me, hey, dude, there's something going on, but they weren't being negative about it. They were giving me permission to keep going.
It's an interesting perspective. It really is. I think we should probably end on the fact that you and I have a lot of similar tattoos.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm 37 now.
Okay, you're 37. I'm 53. But do you on someplace on your body have Calvin and Hobbes Calvin being Spaceman Spiff?
Yes, I absolutely do.
I do too. Do you have the time machine?
I don't have the time machine.
I got you there. Do you have Stupendous Man?
I do have Stupendous Man.
All right, I have that. Do you have Calvin as a giant when he's doing his homework?
No.
I have that one. And I have the cover of I think probably the most famous book, which now I'm going to struggle for the name of, but where Calvin and Hobbes look very devious on the front of it.
Oh,
standing
yeah.
next to each other. I have those as well. But yours are in black and white. Yours are cool.
Mine are all black and white, and I actually want to do one more Calvin and Hobbes themed tattoo. And the drawing of Calvin and Hobbes speeding down the hill in a wagon?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I want to replace the wagon with a unicorn, and I want to have Calvin and Hobbes riding a unicorn over my back as my kind of respect to type 1 diabetes.
Listen, if you get that, I want to see it.
I'm reaching out to tattoo artists and no one responds back. I'm I think I'm going to have to figure out someone to draw this for me before I go to them, but I'm definitely going to do it.
I have to tell you, I'm looking at mine right now. Tattoos are crazy. in my first one that probably got when I was like 20, there's no color left in Hobbs at all. He is basically just black and white. All the orange is gone, although like the white in his belly is gone. Like it's still some color in the bushes and Calvin's hair and a little bit of red in his shirt, but I stay alive long enough. This shit's going to be black and white too, I guess.
Yep.
It's interesting.
The first, so speaking of illegal things in Dubai, tattooing is also illegal. But for my birthday one year, my wife found a Russian tattoo guy who tattoos out of his house. Like we walked into his house and went into his, where the breakfast nook would be. And it's a tattoo studio. And in the living room, his child, like 6-year-old child's playing Mario Kart. And I'm sitting back there getting tattooed by some dude with, all this Russian propaganda around his house. And, he's tattooing Calvin and Hobbes. He'd never heard of him. He's like, oh, this is funny tattoo. I was like, all right.
You're like, whatever. Oh, Jordon, you're something, man. That's awesome. I'm looking now. I might have to have this thing recolored. Like you're talking. I'm like, maybe I should do something with this. Jeez. The guy that did these is my guy's still alive, still kicking.
Is he still tattooing?
Yeah, he is.
All right. When'd you get yours?
I got my first tattoo, which is the Calvin and Hobbes on the side of my leg. I think I was 20, which would make that.
That tattoo's older than me.
33 years ago, the first one.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me give my guy a shout out here. Hold on a second. I've never done that before. I don't know if he still calls it what he calls it. Let me see if he's changed the name of the place or not. I'll look real quick. Tattoo Odyssey. Yeah, he's on Castor Avenue in Philadelphia.
Give him a call.
Guy's name is Gil. I wonder how old he was when he did that. He's still there. That's awesome. Yeah, Gil's Tattoo Odyssey. If you're in the Philly area, you want to check it out. I would imagine there's a picture of my leg in a book somewhere up on a wall or something like that.
Oh, and I know you wanted to close on the tattoo, but I just recently posted a commentary on one of your podcasts that you did where the nurse gave that poor girl 150 units of insulin. And I posted it on TikTok and I tried to get people to go to Juicebox, but Jesus Christ, it must have hit the algorithm in a weird way. And these nurses just went wild on this post. It kind of went a little viral.
What happened there? Because I saw that and I appreciate, by the way, Jordon, God love you. I appreciate it. In your first video, you never say the words Juicebox Podcast. You say Diabetes Podcast. It broke my heart. But
I did tag you in the comments though.
I know. Broke my heart.
I'm sorry.
And I said to somebody, I was like, hey, something with Juicebox finally went viral, but he didn't mention the name.
Oh, yeah. I figured type 1 diabetes would be a much more like.
Oh, no, you did that. Listen, I'm not busting your balls. Like, it was just fun. It was funny from my side. I was like, oh, somebody finally blew something up with a story from the podcast in it, but he never said Juicebox in the audio. But man, that thing got you a couple 100,000 views, right?
I think it's at like 400,000. Get this. They give you metrics and like people have spent 4,000 hours of real time watching that video.
Isn't that crazy?
It's wild. And just the amount of nurses who are coming in and validating that experience, like, oh yeah, this happened. And it's like, oh my God.
So you're getting a lot of nurses that come in and go, yo, we don't know what we're doing. Is that what's happening?
Pretty much is how it happened.
Yeah, great. That's uplifting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, listen, first of all, it's very nice of you to, mention the podcast at all on your channel. I appreciate that very much.
I probably tagged you in like 50 comments that day. So sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. It was awesome. Like I popped on and I was like, oh, what's happening here? We can tell people, what are you? You're at Kiss Me, I'm Irish.
Kiss Me, I'm
right?
Irish.
Oh my! Oh! That's my be without my glasses. Kiss Me, I'm HIGH. Rish, RISH. Jomo T1D.
High like hyperglycemic.
Yeah. What made you start with the TikTok?
Well, I was doing TikTok before, and I don't have a big following. It's kind of just therapeutic, like a video diary of my life through the years.
Yeah.
But I did go to TikTok when I was figuring out what was wrong with me. And it was the first time that I felt a sense of community on that app. And since then, I've dedicated my whole entire account to type 1 diabetes awareness, especially adult diabetes awareness, especially dudes with diabetes as adults.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's enough out there.
And you're positive on it too. I like that. I've seen some people try to do the thing where you sort of take whatever trend on TikTok is, and try to adapt it to diabetes, or, do the complaining thing where you jump on and you bitch about somebody to try to get the number up or something like that. But yours is really positive. It's excellent.
Yeah. I mean, as weird as it sounds, I have such profound respect for type 1 diabetes as a disease that I struggled with understanding how serious it was. And I think a lot of men, especially with the egos that we walk around with, don't really pay it the respect it deserves. Diabetes saved my life. Diabetes gave me another chance at life. If I were not type 1 diabetic, I would not be here anymore. That person is gone, right? So it is a positive thing in my life. It's an annoying little thing. I wish I could have positivity without it, but it's something that saved my life. So,
well, I'm glad you're feeling better and you're putting your effort out there the way you are. I appreciate it. Should I call this episode Ego Death? What should I call it?
You could call it Ego Death. You could call it whatever you want. Your names are rather great.
Oh, I appreciate that. All right, man. I thank you for your time very much. And if you hold on for a second, I'll tell you a couple things when we're done. But I really do appreciate this. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep. The podcast episode that you just enjoyed was sponsored by Eversense CGM. They make the Eversense 365. That thing lasts a whole year. One insertion every year? Come on. You probably feel like I'm messing with you, but I'm not. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Thanks for tuning in today, and thanks to Medtronic Diabetes for sponsoring this episode. We've been talking about Medtronic's MiniMed 780G system today, an automated insulin delivery system that helps make diabetes management easier day and night. Whether it's their meal detection technology or the Medtronic extended infusion set, it all comes together to simplify life with diabetes. Go find out more at my link, medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following the podcast in your favorite audio app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do that now. Seriously, just to hit follow or subscribe will really help the show. If you go a little further in Apple Podcasts and set it up so that it downloads all new episodes, I'll be your best friend. And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll probably send you a Christmas card. Would you like a Christmas card? If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginnings series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. The series begins at episode 698 in your podcast player, or you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com and click on Bold Beginnings in the menu. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording, wrongwayrecording.com.